Okay, so I'd like to begin by acknowledging to you, Joyce, Sheila, and my deep gratitude, appreciation, pleasure, and privilege to be here with you today on Zoom, you and Sheila in New York, and me on the other coast in Laguna Beach, California. Thank you very much to Zoom. It's early afternoon where you are and late morning where I am. But our intention today was to really create a play space, to try to capture you, Joyce. No small task. Over these past 99 years, to create an open and evolving conversation that somehow highlights your journey as a social worker and psychoanalyst. So I just would like to take a moment because I'm feeling just a touch of emotion and just feel my gratitude, for knowing you, for knowing Sheila, for some of the unexpected benefits that come from our profession in being able to not only be colleagues, but to be good friends, caring friends. So maybe for starters, to create a foundation and perspective for this conversation, I thought that I would give a brief synopsis of a pretty long bio. So I'll try to keep it short, highlighting major areas with you. So, Joyce, you have been one of the leaders of the study group when our organization, which began in 1980, was the National Membership Committee on Psychoanalysis and Clinical Social Work. It was referred to in terms of acronym NMCOP. And the mission statement at that time was to further the understanding of psychoanalytic theory and practice within the profession of social work, as well as to the public at large. And this early organization, of which you were a significant part and leader, had a name change in 2007, becoming the American Association for Psychoanalysis in Clinical Social Work. So your publications, some of which came out of this study group, include Separation Individuation, Theory and Application, co-authored with Nathini Ruskin and Patsy Turini, Fostering Healing and Growth, a Psychoanalytic Social Work Approach, co-edited with Jean Sandville, the Social Work Psychoanalyst Casebook, Clinical Voices, in honor of Jean Sandville, co-edited with Elaine Rose, and the Sibling Relationship, a Force for Growth and Conflict, authored by you.
You've taught... Now, that did not come out of the study group.
Right. The initial ones did come out of the study group. Thank you for emphasizing that. The sibling relationship was authored independently by you. Yes, thank you.
Sort of much later.
Right.
I think, yeah.
Right, okay. 2011. Thank you. Thank you. You've taught and mentored. Is it
all right if I interrupt like that?
Sure. I'd want this to be a free flow conversation. So please feel free to do that. You've taught and mentored many of us, having been on the faculties of the Adelphi University School of Social Work, Hunter College School of Social Work, and Smith College School of Social Work. You've served as a faculty member and training analyst at the New York School for Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy and Psychoanalysis in New York City, as well as the Society for Psychoanalytic Research and Study. You've been on the editorial board of the Clinical Social Work Journal. You have also been the recipient of many awards, including the National Coalition of Mental Health Professionals and Consumers, the first annual Joyce Edward Consumer Advocacy Award, the Lifetime Achievement Award for our association, the American Association for Psychoanalysis and Clinical Social Work, and the Day Garrett Award from Smith College School of Social Work. You are named as a distinguished practitioner in social work of the National Academies of Practice. So I hope I have adequately, although as a synopsis, touched on that. It's a formidable bio, Joyce. So
It
with
was
that,
very rewarding.
oh yes, I'm so glad to hear that. I'm so glad to hear that you can not only hear that reflected to you, but also feel your heart lift and feel the reward of having done that and contributed in the many ways that you have.
And associates
Yes.
in
Yes.
every one of those situations.
Yes. So moving on to some conversation. Sheila, would you like to begin?
Yeah, I'd love to begin. As social workers and psychoanalysts, we're taught to see, trace, and understand how the past informs the present. Was there any family issue in your early life that encouraged you to pursue a career in helping others? Any psychological difficulties? Or where did the boost and drive to help people all of your life come from?
Well, I look at it differently as I reflect back. Actually, there were experiences that might have led to it, but I don't think I ever thought of it as leading to it. Number one was during the Depression, and I had an aunt that lived with me, and she worked for the Department of Welfare. And I never, she was an influence on me. She was very liberal, and my father was very conservative. So I grew up listening to their debates about Roosevelt. And my aunt keeps saying, the people on welfare are just like us. They're just not as lucky. And I think that, in retrospect, had something to do with the fact that I was interested. We did have mental illness in the family. My grandfather, in those days, they didn't have medications or anything. And in those days, he was sent off. He was depressed. And he lived in Oxford, Mississippi, which was a small town. And he used to go to a sanitarium every year. But I don't know if he went every year, but he would go get very depressed that he would go to this sanitarium out west. And I knew that it was great sorrow. And the sadness was he finally did kill himself. Mm-hmm. It made the aunt that I mentioned who lived with us, she was in high school at the time. And she had, I guess she went to school that morning, and he asked her to come back. And she said she couldn't, she was going to be late for school. And when she got home, he had killed himself. And I don't recall when I heard those things that they made any impact on me. I mean, ultimately, I was probably about 7 at the time. Ultimately, I realized how sad it was for my aunt, and she did continue to have emotional depressions for her life. But I suppose without knowing it, my grandfather actually came back and lived with us for a while. the people, and he went to a sanitarium in Morristown, and they suggested that he do gardening. So my mother dug up all the backyard, and he put a vegetable garden in. But none of these things did I think at the time was significant. And as I look back, in response to this question, it took on more meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And there really, my sister had bipolar depression. My mother probably did too. And I just didn't register it that way at the time. So I think that that may have contributed.
I'm struck by your father's love of gardening, and you garden people.
It was my grandfather.
Grandfather, yeah. I think that you garden people. You support people like a gardener supports an early sapling. And I felt that from you. You encouraged me so much in my writing. And you didn't do it for me because that's not your style. But you said things like, it could be said better. Go to the research and find a better framework. And you inspired me. And you taught me how to fish. You know, you didn't give me the fish. You taught me how to fish. And you've been that for a lot of people. But I know it.
You always had the ability to fish, and you've done all the fishing that's possible. You have outfished me. It was my pleasure.
No. Yeah. So it's interesting to learn about your family. And you're right. We don't realize that what's happening forms us.
No.
Until later.
Yeah. Until I looked at that question, I know I knew that there were problems, but I never saw them as particularly formative.
Right. It's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah. And another thing that I found interesting as well, Joyce, in your the book that you authored alone, the sibling relationship book, was really bringing to light the significance of your relationship with your sister as well in forming you as a person. And I have appreciated in your writing how on a micro level you are very curious. It's not as though there's any criticism or judgment. It's more of a curiosity about, well, maybe there's more here than just Oedipal conflicts. And we need to pay more attention to our relationships with siblings, or for that matter, whether we don't have siblings. And so I appreciated that as well. You're bringing to light the sibling relationship, because in my training, that was not something back in the day that was really highlighted as well.
In my analysis, this was true of those days, I remember if I would bring up my sister, my analyst would say, you'd rather talk about your sister than your mother and father. So it was always seen as a defense. And after I got done with my analysis, I had no better understanding or any more comfort than I had before, because it was never touched upon. And that was true at the time, as you said. I think that I was aware of in terms of wanting to understand better.
I remember you presenting a paper about the book, and I was struck by the question and answer period after your presentation. Not one person spoke about a patient, and I have never been to a conference where people were so enthralled with the idea of siblings being formative. And they all spoke about their relationships with siblings. And I was astounded by that. And I'm still astounded by the ability that you have of capturing something that nobody sees, you know.
Well, you know, it's interesting you say that, because I had sent a letter out before I wrote the book asking if anyone had any clinical examples where siblings figured importantly. And every answer I got was from somebody about their own sibling.
Right, right.
Particularly the chapter I did on siblings with some kind of problem.
Disability.
Yes. They were, all of those were people who actually were social workers or therapists who had siblings with problems. And nobody wrote about their patient. The only bad experience I had,
Right.
I gave a couple of talks off that book. And one meeting that I went to, several people got up because they were angry that I had not talked about only children. And I said I really had not any cases, and basically it was on siblings. But I thought they were right. What would they have liked to have talked about, I asked. And I now understand even better. They were older. They were now facing aging parents. And that was most of the response, that they had no one to share and they were going to be left all alone. And I see what it means to my kids to have each other to call when things are not so well with me. And it is, and I had my sister. She was remarkable in the degree to which she took responsibility for our parents.
Joyce, I would also add, because for me, part of my interest in social work and then psychoanalytic training came out of the interest not only in the micro, what happens in the consulting room within our own internal worlds, but also how that relates to the world at large, or how it offers an understanding or offers guidelines or directions to policy planning and issues. And so the other thing that I really appreciated about your book, The Sibling Relationship, and it seemed a little before its time, was even your reference to looking at implications with donations of sperm and ova in terms of there being more half or full sibling relationships that we know about. And just those implications of unintended consequences, and really drawing up some recommendations and guidelines for how many donations should be allowed. So I just wanted to add that too, that I've really appreciated how your lens seems to look in, and then your lens also seems to look out to broader implications of what our psychoanalytic understanding might also shed light on and make recommendations about. So thank you for that.
Well, that's a whole topic in and of itself.
Right. But you do that. You seem to, look at how the outside gets in and how the inside gets out. And I've just really appreciated the way that you look at both the inner and the outer. So I wanted to acknowledge that.
It's interesting because I went to a talk, someone wrote an article in the Times about how poorly boys are doing developmentally, that there are more suicides among boys, they're doing poorly in school, etc. And so the whole question of what's happened to men as women have achieved much more. And it occurred to me that I wondered, I didn't have an answer. I wonder what it means that so many children are being born and nobody knows who the father is. The father is a little something in a test tube. And what does it do to the picture of men? Everything has its consequences.
Yes, yes, yes. And see, that's another thing that I really appreciate about you is your curiosity. It seems like your curiosity, at least from my point of view, seems to lead you into some of the things that you write about or question or challenge. And so one of the other things that Sheila and I were very struck by was at the AAP conference in 2017, there was a filming of different social work psychoanalysts. And that was the Mind and Milieu, from the consulting room to the community and back. And in that clip, you talked about how your work with children, some children who had emotional difficulties and or were on the autistic spectrum, how the psychoanalytic idea about the personality profile of the parent really didn't match up with your own direct experience in working with this population of children and parents. And so I wondered if you would say a little bit more about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I worked a lot of years in a school with mainly autistic children. And we had a clinical team, 2 psychologists and 1 psychiatrist, all of whom had psychoanalytic backgrounds. Some of them were really in training at the time. And when I worked, really with some of the children, they were so difficult, they would have made the parents pull back because there was no way of making a connection with them. And they would always chide me. Oh, you're so over-identified with the parents. You don't see them for what they are. And that was really one of the things that moved me to go for psychoanalytic training. It was to put, because at that time, and now you have to realize this, long ago, the social workers on the teams were the handmaidens of the psychiatrists. And your opinion was of very little value. I don't know if you want me to go into the whole thing where I went for training.
Not necessarily. I just really appreciate it. I mean, I remember in my training, we looked at how theory informed practice, but we also looked how practice informed theory, that sometimes it just wasn't quite right. And so that's what I really appreciated about what you were drawing attention to, was how your practice, your lived experience with these children and their parents really didn't match up with the psychoanalytic construct of the personality profile of the parent. And I love that, because that's how we grow, to inquire, to question, to say, you know, is this true? And where might there be some blind spots? So I just thought that was very courageous. Both Sheila and I thought that was very courageous of you as a young social worker to question that and to have the presence to be vocal and visible with your questioning about it.
Of course, I was very lucky. Margaret Mahler came along with her book, The Psychological Birth of the Infant. And she clearly appreciated the fact that there was something in the child itself, herself or himself, that made it difficult for them to really extract what was available. And that made the whole change from that refrigerator parent idea.
Right.
So I was lucky, but at that time, it took a lot of courage because I was the only one on the team that spoke out. What I found troubling was you get a theory and you can get very wedded to it.
Yes.
As these members of the team were. And they were influenced by the people they were taught by. And so if the person didn't fit that picture, then you weren't able to see it. And of course, I don't think they had that much respect for social workers anyway. So we were good for the, nitty gritty.
So grateful you had that wider lens and that wise view rather than that thinking in the box, fixed view. So that's another thing that I just wanted to acknowledge in who you are as a person and the imprint that made on me as well in my development as a psychoanalyst.
It seems like you're a lifelong learner and educator who is committed to expanding the understanding of psychoanalytic ideas beyond our profession and into the public. I'm struck by your ability to take the complicated psychoanalytic ideas and to distill it down for the public who haven't had years of training and make it real. And if in Jefferson's Ferry, which is a wonderful community, you've been in charge of bringing them some lectures that you wouldn't expect of dinner talk. But I wonder if you can tell us about that.
Oh, well, you've got a very interested, informed senior community. Many of the people here had been teaching at Stony Brook University. And they're very interested, as most of these retirement villages are, in continuous learning. So we used to have, and they are starting again, but we got stuck during COVID. We had to suspend most of these. But I, at least 3 times, gave a series of lectures on psychoanalytic theory. And I what were the differences today in our thinking, that we're not exactly like Freud, that things have changed, who were the new people. Of course, I realized I couldn't do it today because I probably didn't get beyond Mahler and Coat and Kernberg and that group of analysts. There's many more now. I tried to show, we use the analytic theory has in various programs, like the New Haven policing program, where all the police are given lectures on, and actually they're now I don't know where it stands today, because this is about 10 years now, I guess, maybe 8. They used to send out an analyst where there was a killing, a murder in a home.
Wow.
Then with the police, an analyst if there were children, to deal with the children. There's so many very good programs, preventive and interventive. And so people were very interested in that, to see how analysts had moved on. And there was an analyst, and I wish I remember his name, when they had the Irish, the peace accords in Ireland.
Yes. In
Yeah.
Belfast. Uh-huh.
Yes, and there was an analyst involved in them, and how he used his analytic training. And that's a story in itself that's very fascinating. So I loved getting that stuff and seeing where it went. So I did, and the
Yes.
people responded very well. But it was simple. I mean, it wasn't complicated.
But that's the best, because to make it simple requires some wisdom. So you're able to boil it down and get to the nitty-gritty. So I appreciate when things can be made simple, because more people can then connect and understand.
Actually, it's harder in some ways,
I agree.
because if you use big words, you don't know what they mean, and the other
That's
people
right.
don't.
That's right.
Yeah.
Really appreciate the
And
production.
that's what you did in fostering healing and growth. You brought psychoanalysis to mainstream patients, the not highly structured neurotic person, but mainstream clinics and real work that we did with real people, an average Joe and Jane, an average family in distress. And you offered interviews and vignettes of everyday life that we had in clinics. We didn't serve at fancy places. We had mental health clinics. And you brought it to the masses of us and to social work students. And they could see firsthand how it could be applied to their patient.
Well, Gene
and
Sand.
that was a great
Oh, sorry.
great thing.
I said Jean Sandville, who co-edited that book, she was responsible for a great deal of that, because they were all contributed by various workers. We didn't write those chapters, but the flair for writing and for putting things simply. So she was responsible for a lot of that. I learned a lot from her.
Yeah. Well, I'm reflecting, and this is very touching to me, that I met both you, Joyce, and you, Sheila, at the same time, January 2000, at the 7th annual conference at the Marriott, at the World Trade Center Marriott, New York. And I met you, Joyce, through Jean, because Jean Sandville was one of my mentors and supervisors, as well as becoming a very dear, close friend. And so it really touches me 23 years later to be with the two of you here now, also remembering Jean, whose passing will be actually 1 decade with this upcoming AAP conference in 2023. Her passing was in 2013, but here she is in spirit with us. And anybody who knew Jean knew that one of her favorite quotes from Psychoanalysis was a quote by Renee Spitz from 1964. Life begins in dialogue, and psychopathology can be seen as a derailment of dialogue. And I heard her repeat that always in different ways. She got a lot of mileage out of that quote. She would find ways of bringing that in a variety of ways. And it seemed to be a quote that really, like a compass, like a good compass, guided her thinking. And I was curious if there's been any particular psychoanalytic quote or particular teaching that has also been there for you as a compass, Joyce, that you find yourself going back to again and again because of its elucidating value.
Karen, I'm so sorry. I really can't think of anything.
Yeah.
I think I really can't think of anything.
Yeah. That's fine.
Maybe after I leave, it'll occur to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just thought it was interesting, this quote, because it seems also very pertinent to the topic of the upcoming AAP-CSW conference, which will be in Chicago, reaching across the divide and bringing a psychoanalytic sensibility to culture and practice. So again, just these gleanings of wisdom that seem to also open up ways that we can apply, broaden, and include people beyond our field into an understanding of psychoanalytic thinking and some of its jewels. So,
well, Jean's quote could be central to all of us, because when all's said and done, it's the path to a satisfying, more or less satisfying life. And it's certainly the path to healing in our field, the dialogue. And I'm really not up on what's current today. I do get the journal, and somehow I can't, unless you can discuss something, an article or in a class, I can read the journal, but I don't feel like I'm grasping where the field is at now, the psychoanalytic field. You can't forget, I stopped the getting the journals, so I'm not really up on them. But I feel that the field has moved more, and correct me, towards an appreciation of the relational element.
yeah.
Yes.
And that's where I think it belongs. It's all said. I think if healing takes place, that's where it comes from. I always remember I had a patient once. I've seen her because she had made a suicidal attempt. And I saw her probably for 2 years or 3 years. And then she moved away and she got married and she had a family. And she apparently was coming back to Long Island. So she asked if she could come and see me. And I went to my office, but she came to the front door. And my husband said, she had 2 little girls. Were you the patient that Joyce was going to meet? She said, no, I'm not the patient anymore, but I did come to meet her. And so I came around and I made coffee in the kitchen and gave the kids cookies. And she said to me, I thought it was all those interpretations I made, but she said to me, would you like to know what I think helped me? I said, yes. She said, you were always interested in these and everything and anything I said. You always wanted to know more. What was it? This, that. She said, I began to figure I must be a more interesting person than I was. Well, obvious that wasn't it.
Yes.
I thought she was suggesting something about the treatment. And I think in the long run, if I look, pardon me?
Go on.
No, that's all I had to say. So then I think that Jean's statement about the dialogue is still so apt.
Yeah. I was going to say that the incident of the vignette that you described is all in there. she wanted to tell you how you influenced her life as a friend and as an interested person and as a loving person. And she felt she had the right to come in through the front door, and you went with it. You gave her children the feeding that you gave her. And so you included them in your, yeah. It's lovely. And this has been a true conversation because we all discovered new things about each other and old things also. So it's been wonderful to be part of the discussion. And Karen, I remember meeting you at that first conference and loving the paper that you presented. You presented a piece about wondering whether your house visits to a patient who had cancer could be basically helpful in a psychoanalytic lens. And you accomplished bringing us to that patient, and you accomplished opening up a dialogue. And I fell in love with you as a person that day. So it's wonderful to feel so close to people that you respect so much. And we play in our minds and we play outside of our minds, and we're good friends. And they said women can be catty and can be harsh to each other, but that is much less of a response than what we have together. And we can have this kind of thing, collegial, loving, and inspiring. So thank you for both of you, both ahead of me and younger than me. And it's been a great life that we've had with each other.
Yes, well, that's a beautiful ending, I think, to a wonderful dialogue and conversation. Thank you, Joyce, for taking this time to be with us. I think it's been a beautiful flow, and I'm really not inclined to edit any of it. It just really shows the natural flow, the ebb and flow of our dialogue, of our thinking, of our associations together. And I think it's a beautiful illustration of a life well lived that includes being able to care and learn for each other in this way. So thank you.
Karen, there was one more thing I would have liked to have gotten to say. I don't know if it's worth it, but you know, the last thing I wrote, and it was published in the Clinical Social Work Journal, was one of some papers that I did on friends in old age.
Oh.
And that has been my most, not currently, but most recent work. And so it kind of comes full circle.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah.
And that is the area that if I had more time in my life, I would have liked to explore more. So for whatever it's worth, it was done in the Clinical Social Work Journal 2015.
Thank you, Joyce. What a beautiful arc in terms of bringing us
Yes.
circle.
Yes.
I'm so glad that you brought this to the table, brought this to our attention. And yes, it sounds perfect. Thank you.
We'll read it again. We'll read it again.
Okay.
I was
Well,
a little I was a little worried about taking too much time, and here you are bringing other delicious dishes to our table. So thank you for that, Joyce.
Well, this was lovely, and you're two such remarkable young people, and I wish you all well. And you brought our field to such, you brought our field such riches, and to have been a part of, whether it's reading a paper or was Sheila, I've had so much wonderful experience with. It's enriched my life so much.
I'll be visiting you soon. Get the couch ready.
Okay, all of you
Okay.
keep well and have fun and enjoy what you're doing.
Thank you, Joyce, and thank you for all that you continue to bring and give to us. Thank you.
Well, I think I'm not doing so much these days, but this was kind of a shot in the arm. I was
Good.
so.
Yeah.
Are we recording this, or is this off the record?
I'm gonna stop it right now. Okay, so let me stop the recording right now.